A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to Films I'm Willing to Talk About Again. Yeah, so we do have ourselves yet another big point in time where I can hopefully get to talk more about other films that I have yet to talk about again. So I'm certainly going to have a lot of titles that'll be worth discussing in this series. For now though, what we're going to do is focus on a little something that is a little over 20 years old, known as the Rescue Heroes movie. Yeah, that's right. This was basically the combination of Fisher-Price and Nelvada going together to create their own film adaptation based on a 1999 TV show, which was meant to, in fact, advertise a lineup of figures called the Rescue Heroes. They're a group of elite, well-trained individuals whom are made to tackle any job, regardless of what situation it may be. Floods, tornadoes, wildfires, sandstorms, you name it. This was a pinnacle point in history when a number of different TV shows were circumnavigating the world of rescue operations, and this certainly was no different. Of course, the Rescue Heroes TV show came and went around between 1999 and 2003, when the series would finally come to an end. However, Nelvada and Fisher-Price would both decide to create their own movie adaptation, but this was, in fact, their usage of CGI. Yeah, and that's right. This was technically during the age where CG wasn't exactly perfect at the time, but for the year 2003, it seemed that almost everyone was trying to get in on the game. And I would say between the years of 2003 and 2006, it was a big part of history in my life that I have been able to see a lot of CG related films. And you'll certainly get to see a lot of CG related films talked about yet again here in this series. But anyways, the Rescue Hero movie basically starts off just as you might expect. It begins with a series of title cards, and then a helicopter supposedly providing live coverage of a volcano in Ecuador. Supposedly, it had been dormant for a very long time. Penny Pooler, the reporter in question, alongside her helicopter pilot known by the name of Tony, would both hover over the volcano, not knowing that it was actually about to erupt. However, the situation itself would eventually be cut off, at least for now. Because next thing we know, we're in North Dakota. Yeah, that's right. It basically changes the scene right before we're shown something enticing. But the thing is, it's more or less just a temporary halting of this part of the plot. After all, there was no rescue heroes involved at that point. But that pretty much just gave us the implementation of something different. Something that actually would call for the rescue heroes' assistance. Because first there's a volcano, but now we have an earthquake. Yeah, that's right. So this earthquake in question was causing various buildings to shake and rumble, and even a few construction zones to become very unsafe. Unfortunately, not everybody was able to escape the impending disaster. And there were even some instances where people's lives were in serious risk for potential lethal accidents or destruction of all sorts. But that's basically where the fun of it truly starts. The rescue heroes are introduced inside an aircraft. This craft in particular is basically their main transport to getting from headquarters to whatever site they're needed. And well, in this case, they meet up with one of the rescue heroes named Rip Rockefeller. He informs them about the situation regarding the earthquake. 5 construction workers are trapped in the building, and they basically utilize various strategies to rescue them all. They operate a tower crane that's close by, secure it to the building with braces. They also scatter in order to find the workers more efficiently. Jake Justice, one of the main heroes, operates around in his vehicle to ensure that other civilians are also not in any danger or harm's way. And he gets to be pretty impressive right off the bat, much like how he was in the show. Because what he does here, he actually manages to catch a gargoyle that was falling out of the sky and about to slam on someone's head. And he even goes so far to dispose of the gargoyle in a unique manner. A motorist unfortunately gets way too close to the edge of a cliff and almost falls, but with a little bit of luck and in the nick of time, Justice is able to rescue him. So, right then and there, that's basically a unique introduction to one of the main characters there. But what about some of the others, like Rocky Canyon or Billy Blazes or Wendy Waters? Well, they do have their own way of uniforming their actions. I mean, you got Wendy saving another one of the construction workers who's basically a welder of the building. She almost falls to her doom, but thanks to Waters' quick thinking, she's saved. And as for Billy, he makes an epic jump from the top of the building in order to get down to a lower floor and eventually help a worker who's trapped under a large piece of rubble, and is eventually able to carry him down. And with Rocky's help, along with a medic named Bat, they're both able to bring this victim to safety, while also avoiding an anvil. Then of course there's Jack Hammer, who wasn't exactly as prevalent in the series, but in the movie he apparently plays an even bigger part. So it's a bit of a rare example of someone who doesn't do so big in the show, but in the movie he becomes even bigger. Anyways though, Hammer's case, he basically utilizes another bad to the bone move, getting the last worker out safely. He basically uses the trash chute as his means of escape from the building's collapse. So that's what you call amazing. And after all that's said and done, everybody manages to get down safely, with a few minor slip-ups here and there. The tower crane finally ends up falling to the ground, but thankfully, not before everybody escapes. And well, that's basically what you call an introductory note. A good way to help introduce the characters to the plot and also give us viewers a good chance to identify with them and also understand their intentions. No matter how pure or how not so pure you might put it, this was certainly a good way to start a movie. A movie that's enticing, action-packed, and also has some witty dialogue. You know, because with the likes of Norm Spencer, Joe Motiki, and various other actors that were around at this time, it's no surprise that Fisher-Price, Nilvada, and various other companies would also come together to create an adaptation of this magnitude. But then that's basically where it all comes to an end, at least for now. We cut back to the volcano in Ecuador. It erupts, causes the helicopter to lose control, and they end up crashing down on the slope nearby, where the caldera is literally leaking lava. And well, before you know it, that's where we're introduced to the MAC, or Mountain Action Command Center, basically the headquarters of the rescue heroes themselves. And this is basically where we're basically given the first briefing from Warren Waters, the father of Wendy Waters, of course, if you're familiar with the show by any means. Anyways, he tells them about the situation in Ecuador and that those two people are indeed trapped in their helicopter on the side of that volcanic slope. So, with the help of Billy Blazes, Wendy Waters, and Rocky Canyon, they're all able to make their way over there and forge their path to escape those two people trapped in the copter. Their basic method of going up there is by simply parking their vehicle down towards the bottom of the volcano due to high turbulence, and with Billy and Rocky making their way up the slope via a series of piton maneuvers, as well as some rope to prevent them from falling. They are in fact able to make their way up there. Unfortunately, this is where one of the first major mistakes comes in, because if you're familiar with Rocky Canyon's intentions, well, there's points where he actually goes in and makes some mistakes here and there. And in the movie, he actually is no different. It's almost like he hardly learned any lessons by any means. But then again, this is more or less just continuity that's more in line with the show, and it doesn't necessarily take place before or after any events that happen within the show. And when you think about it, there's already been a lot of mileage that's been expended from the likes of the characters themselves. It's hardly clear as to what kind of plot line we're truly given and if there's any sort of timeline that takes place. But no matter what the sort is, it's just a show and a movie. There's nothing we really could do about that. Anyways, though, the mistake he makes here in this instance is that Rocky actually does not use any of the pitons once they get close to the top where the helicopter is at. And well, in this instance, Rocky goes for the cliffside, grabs on, causes Pebbles to dislodge, and they end up colliding into Billy, causing him to slip and fall. And well, that's a really bad sign alone. The fact there's no piton there means that if they both end up letting go of the ledge, that means they're doomed. Because the lava is literally right below them. So Rocky, of course, not applying any more pitons to prevent them from falling, truly was a dangerous situation that he put them both in. He definitely put them both at risk for that reason. Thankfully, though, they didn't end up falling. Billy ends up grabbing onto some weird plant to try to break his fall, but it doesn't end up working. Rocky is, in fact, able to get up there, pull Billy up, and they're able to secure the helicopter and basically put a giant hole in the window to free Penny Pooler and Tony. They both manage to get down by rappelling through the side before the helicopter ends up falling over the ledge. More rocks fall, and presumably, since Wendy was still down there, they didn't know if she was still alive or not after the impact from the helicopter itself. Thankfully, she comes around, rescues them, and they're on their way back to the Mac. And well, this is basically where things start to get rather interesting. Because, for the most part, Billy was rather disappointed about Rocky's performance. By not applying pitons, he put them both at risk. And by causing Billy to fall from those pebbles that were up at the top, once he grabbed onto the ledge, of course Billy was not going to maintain grip on the side for much longer due to the impact. And so, that certainly was very close to being killed. On both ends at least. So of course, Billy implies a punishment to Rocky to clean the jet. Yeah. So think about that. If I happen to make a mistake of this magnitude, of course I would get punished in this sort of manner. Probably be slightly worse than being forced to clean up an entire vehicle. But in any case, Rocky feels disappointed, thinking that it could have been unfair. But yet, deep down, he does realize he might have made a mistake on that part. Of course, Billy wasn't entirely known for climbing up rocky mountains and slopes like he does, so perhaps he could eventually find forgiveness from him. After a little talk with Ariel, they basically come to an agreement that maybe Rocky should consult with him, just to at least make sure that they're on the same page. And that's what he does. But not before coming up with a clever idea on how to clean up the jet. Yeah, the fire truck. Of course, it's not shown, but we could assume that it's basically done with the fire truck's hose. Anyways, though, this basically comes around to a point where the space station, if you remember again from the show, that's basically where the likes of Warren Waters as well as his assistants are located. They basically provide intel to the rescue heroes from way up above, sort of like how at the International Space Station, as well as various other pods and satellites and whatnot that are orbiting around the planet, we have a lot of communication with the outside world that is clearly above our own world. So, intercellular communication from the stars is more than just possible, if you ask me. Anyways, though, it isn't long before Warren, as well as his crew, they managed to discover a series of storms that happen to be moving across certain parts of the world. They don't seem to be breaking up, and they seem to get strong with each passing minute. But that doesn't exactly become a highly prevalent topic for some time. After a little talk between Rocky and Billy, a little bit of arguing over basketball and whatnot, which they call b-ball for some reason, I guess it was a cool thing that they said back in the day. Another briefing comes through from Warren Waters. This time, though, it's the concerns of a series of storms that are going through the Swiss Alps. And well, believe it or not, Rocky is the one chosen for the job to assist the likes of Alpines and Bob Sled. Yeah, those are two other rescue heroes that we hardly ever hear much about. And more often than not, they probably could have just been made as introductory portions to the franchise through the usage of this movie. In fact, there's a lot of rescue heroes that most people don't seem to really remember much about that were technically more or less introductory pieces to the franchise thanks to this movie. But in any case though, Rocky makes his way to the Swiss Alps and things start going from here on out a little crazy. And eventually, it builds up in a large series of suspenseful notes, especially if you hear the soundtrack closely. There's a lot of stings that take place, which really help to heighten the level of suspense as to what enticing events are to come by. More often than not, those stings, when parallel to that of the storms that are impending throughout the world, well, this sure was quite a campy and somewhat spooky way to bring about a series of action to the movie, as well as some potential for some scares. Yeah, I bet a lot of young children didn't seem to realize this, but more often than not, this was technically an era where music played quite a bit of a role in kid shows and movies. Anyways though, Rocky arrives at the Alps, is informed by Bob Sled and Alpines about two snowboarders as well as various other people that are around in the area, the high risk of avalanches in the area, as well as a number of other things that could go wrong if anything should happen. But in any case, both Bob and Rocky make their way to find two snowboarders who are still on the slopes. They attempt to go after them, but unfortunately, a giant lightning strike comes down, causing an avalanche. And boy, was it crazy. Probably not as crazy as a lot of those real life videos where avalanches were incredible to watch. But anyways, the snowboarders unfortunately don't make it, end up buried by the avalanche. But thanks to some quick thinking, as well as another set of unique gear, Rocky is able to blast away the snow, allowing them to easily be found, as well as some thermal scanners. Sort of like the kind that you might find when you're metal detecting on the beach. But here, it's more about thermal scanning as opposed to metal detection. Like I said, there's a lot of great gadgets that the rescue heroes have as a means to help rescue people from certain doom. And once again, we pan back to Warren as well as the rest of the crew aboard the space station. It certainly is, without a doubt. Those storms aren't letting up. Anyways though, we once again head back to the Alps. The boarders are thankfully rescued and prepped for transport back to the lodge, where Alpines was waiting for them. Bobsled informs Rocky that they need to go down the west side of the mountain, but instead he goes down an exact different direction, claiming it's faster. I mean, sure, Alpines was the team leader and he is supposed to follow his command, according to Billy, but Alpines, of course, he probably could have done a better job explaining to Rocky about the dangers of avalanches in the area and the mountain grades that they should be traveling on to avoid such risks being taken. But still, Rocky just doesn't seem to get it. He actually ends up causing an avalanche by riding over certain areas alongside the slope. And boy, you could probably see Billy being incredibly mad at him. And after all that happens, Alpine's own plan to cause another avalanche to collide into the one that Rocky made, thereby stopping them both. Which alone was impressive, but again, Billy sees the whole thing happen on Rocky's camera, mounted on his shoulder, and boy is he mad. In fact, another series of debriefings happened back in the MAC between him and other rescue heroes around the world as more disasters unfold, like sandstorms and wildfires and even an oil rig and Big Ben being hit and even a series of miners trapped in South Africa. I mean, it's just crazy. a series of storms is causing all of this chaos to happen all throughout the world. So what happens next? Well, of course, Rocky's brought back to the Mac immediately because of what happened at the Alps. Billy, of course, grounds him and punishes him again, this time forcing him to take the mantle of the monitor system inside the Mac itself. So now Rocky is the one to do all that stuff from behind the screens rather than be out there and enjoy the action that he probably would have gotten if he had followed orders correctly. But again, the real juju has yet to come. Because once again, we cut to Warren. This time, they eventually discover the source of the storms. Yeah, that's right. Thanks to a chimpanzee named Comet, who tried to fly a kite but obviously couldn't because the storms were out there. He actually gives them the idea that they should go back and try to analyze the source of where the storms are from. And turns out, it's that volcano. That's right, the same volcano in Ecuador where Penny Pooler and Tony ended up crashing in their helicopter. And what we saw earlier was already immense. But the fact that this volcano was able to spawn storm clouds, well, that alone was unbelievable. But what's even crazier is, well, what's about to show up next. Rocky apparently finds small particles hidden on his glove from when they were out there at that part at the time, and he has an assistant of his go in to analyze it. And well, that's what happens. After some time passes, some communication disruption occurs, and a series of rescue operations take place in Canada where a giant wildfire separates an entire family. Well, it turns out the stuff on the glove is actually a certain metallic element. An element that is incredibly attractive to the likes of electrical activity, including lightning. It turns out this kind of element has extreme magnetic capabilities. They not only allow the storms to get larger because of the magnetic properties based on polarity differentiation, but it's also what has caused EMP-like ratios to occur, thus heavily disrupting and even disabling communications. Not only between the rescue heroes, but at times even up to the space station. Of course, this isn't the only time that we've gotten to know about severance of communication between the rescue heroes and the space station. If you're familiar with episode 6 of the show, Meteor, then you might know that at some point, a series of meteor strikes actually caused the satellite communications dish on the space station to be broken. This allows for the likes of Wendy Waters to go out and attempt to fix it, which does successfully happen, thankfully. So in a similar situation, we have a series of magnetic-based lightning storms that were generated from a volcano. I mean, it's not that it hasn't happened, but it sure as heck could happen. Because some volcanoes actually have created large storm clouds thanks to immense amounts of ash and particles being flown up into the air and blocking out the sunlight for some time. If you remember Mount St. Helens, that was insane. The entire world was actually covered in ash from the volcano itself in as little as 2 weeks back in 1980. So there's no doubt that maybe a large enough volcano, one that's also as powerful on the VEI index, could actually allow for electrical storm generation or possibly other things to occur. Anyways though, they thankfully are able to have a chip installed into their system, which actually restores communication, thankfully. Operations resume like nothing had happened, and they eventually start to figure out how to tackle these situations individually and with ease. And after everything that's been taking place and everything that's been taken care of, well, unfortunately, not all is well. Billy Blazes ends up falling unconscious onto the floor. Thankfully, with witnesses close by, including Jake and Rocky, they take him over to the infirmary, where somehow they find a shocking discovery. A series of poisons had apparently entered his bloodstream, and they are likely to end his life if the cure is not found. So they start trying to find an antidote, which thankfully they do, but apparently it was actually from that plant that he grabbed, which Rocky actually discovered. He was not only the reason for putting Billy's life at risk, thus allowing for that punishment to happen, but that plant he grabbed on the side of the volcano apparently had all that poison. Went directly into his system, through his hand. And because of what happened when Rocky failed to secure him with the piton and whatnot, he technically allowed Billy to fall, grab onto that plant. So that's basically what you call a double whammy. So Rocky basically feels incredibly guilty for the whole thing. Such a mistake he made could have cost a friend of his own life. At least that's what he knew. So he basically made it his sole mission from here on out to save Billy, which he thankfully manages to do so. He gets permission from the others, in fact, to go on a mission with Wendy back to that volcano. And well, it sure is one heck of a sight. Oh, but the biggest shocker of all is that, well, they discover what would actually happen if those storms were to persist much longer. Apparently, when they went to that source, the space station crew made a shocking discovery. So, like I said, there's a lot of shocker moments in this film, especially by this point within the 40-minute mark. It certainly does give you quite an epic feel, you know, after all that's said and done. I mean, you got North Dakota, you got Ecuador, you got the Swiss Alps, you got Thailand where a flood was occurring. I mean, there's just a lot of moments where Billy alone has to tackle certain challenges while also trying to deal with his declining health. But after everything that's happened up until this point where he falls to the ground and collapses thanks to that poison, it really puts you on the edge. Just wondering, how much further can this whole thing go until finally it just happens? The unthinkable happens to one of our most beloved characters in this movie. I mean, I'm sure Rescue Heroes is something that's fondly remembered nowadays, but a majority of us, especially myself, I mean, I grew up in that particular era. And just think, by the time this movie came out, I was almost 4.5 years old. And knowing I'm 25 now, having rewatched it yet again after a little while, I guess, there's pretty much just no denying the fact that there's just a lot that's worth talking about here. But anyways, it all comes down to a massive explosion. Yeah, that's right. When the storms race across the world and then finally collide in the country of Greenland, well, they'll explode in giant waves, covering the entire planet and potentially causing mass destruction and probably a lot of casualties. So it's a scenario that nobody would have wanted to think about. It's almost like apocalyptic level, cataclysmic in a way. So I'm sure a lot of people have depicted scenarios of this magnitude, like EAS related. Yeah, SPC Hermitage 1258 would be a good example of this thing, but it's not exactly related. But hey, after a successful retrieval of the root of the plant that contains the antidote necessary to help save Billy's life, and after a uniform plan was made to bring all of the rescue heroes together from across the world, converge onto the country of Greenland, and create a lightning rod that would actually help drain the power of the storms thanks to Rocky's inevitable discovery. Supposedly, Billy himself knew about the whole thing, about the lightning itself. Out of many bolts, create a giant one. And supposedly, it could actually potentially stop these storms from becoming cataclysmic. And so, a plan was made. All the rescue heroes would bring along large amounts of metal from all sources possible. Even the Mac's own radio tower was used as the finishing touch. With Jake Justice at the helm, he brings in the cherry on top of this massive metal sundae, sitting on top of an icy continent. So, of course, it all basically comes down to the song "We Are Many, We Are One." So it's a unique montage scene, one that I've always remembered as a kid. And the song itself still sticks with me right here to the very, very present. And after more than 20 years, I never would have figured such vast bits of nostalgia like that would ever come crawling to me. But anyways, it's a vast effort. There's a lot of steps in there. There's a lot of surprises that come every which way. Jack becomes unconscious. Billy regains consciousness. He and Rocky go out there to save Jack Hammer, as well as cut a fused cable. Well, it's just madness. But thankfully, it all manages to work. And when it all comes down to, the clock strikes 0. The storms converge together, and a ginormous series of strikes take place, obliterating the giant lightning rod. The entire thing becomes a melted sculpture, something that I'm sure would be admirable from a distance. But in the end, it all worked out. The storms are eliminated, the sky is brought back to a peaceful, calm aura, and after all that's happened, they've done it. They have once again saved the world from annihilation by a giant volcanic-based magnetic lightning storm. And well, one final thing is left to take on. Another conversation between Billy and Rocky. This time, though, it's about Billy's failure to admit to fault about something. Basically, by not admitting that he was sick, he technically put the team and the mission at risk. Thus, it's him who now has to serve a punishment. But thankfully, Rocky offers him a valuable tip: to use the fire truck to clean up the jet. 2 seconds worth. And then, of course, another basketball game takes place, with the basketball itself offering a unique way to fade to black, conclusifying an epic story. A story that has lasted for over 75 minutes. Yeah, so it's not entirely full-length feature film related, but it still is considered movie related quality. But of course, it's not over yet. They still have their trademark PSA material. Yeah, that's right. If you're familiar with the show, every single one of the show's episodes contained a PSA message, from learning how to stay safe in lightning strikes, to learning how to create a proper fire to prevent it from turning into a wildfire. Well, the movie offered its own valuable tips. Once again, it involved lightning, including how to stay safe from it, remain indoors, turn off and unplug various appliances, as electricity could flow through the wiring and possibly cause injury or death. Well, think like a rescue hero, think sink. This was pretty much the last thing that they ever did, though. In that particular era, where that same old cast, the same old creative team, and the same duo of Fisher-Price Interactive and Nelvana basically brought the franchise to the screens across America, and even the rest of the world. Once again, we hear the song, "We Are Many, We Are One," as the credits roll up until the very end, when those logos pass by. And that is what you call nostalgia in a nutshell. So overall, this was an amazing movie. Certainly one that I've always been very fond about. And knowing this came out around the same time that we got Hot Wheels Highway 35 World Race, being that these were advertised around the same time, and of course, having had a lot of prior experience with these kind of movies, I could safely tell you, even on YouTube, this thing is actually free for viewing. And if anyone wants to check it out, click on the link down below. We're a big fan of the movie and the show, and the franchise itself actually was able to get a hold of the movie and copy it down from beginning to end. Yeah, the whole entire thing is around 78 minutes long from start to finish, and is quite epic. In the ways of action, suspense, and plenty of other unique thrills that practically keep you on the edge of your seat in many ways possible, I give this film a big 8.8 out of 10.1. So while many people might not entirely remember this film, you sure as heck will if you give this thing a watch. Because I guarantee you, it's going to be one heck of a big wow. Well, in any case, this was a lot of time that I put together, but I've sure had a lot to say. The plot line and a lot of different things were certainly worth mentioning. And having spent over 30 minutes on this whole thing, I'm quite proud to say I'm glad it still resonates with me today. Because it does offer a lot of life lessons, and it also gives us plenty of good advice, especially thanks to the PSA materials that they have been giving us since day one. And well, a 5-year-long lifespan from the first episode of the show all the way to the movie, that was basically the last time we ever truly had rescue heroes entirely. But hey, after many years have passed, they actually would bring along newer rescue heroes related media. But it certainly does not have feels like that of the original that we remember so well. But nevertheless, I've checked it out, and it actually is pretty good in its own unique way. I would kind of consider it to be similar in a way to the quality of Paw Patrol, especially with seasons 1 through 3, but I mean, going that far would kind of be a little disservicing to some hardcore fans of the Paw Patrol franchise, so I suppose I'll just let that be. But Rescue Heroes, to be fair, does have a similar feel to it as Paw Patrol does, in its own way at least. So you could say they've tried, but they haven't really gotten much of the heart of the original as we've remembered so well. Anyways though, that's all I got to offer for this piece of films I'm willing to talk about again. And I'll be back, yet again, with some more material.
I want you, but I don't have you yet. I ain't got no tricks to be playing on you.